Hello, I'm Jeong Han Kim, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Rehabilitation Counseling program here at VCU. As you see from your screen, I'm international and originally came from South Korea in 2002. It is great to have this opportunity to introduce my research through this webcast. And I study the relationship between virtues and psychosocial adaptation to chronic illness and disabilities. So basically the topics I'm covering today is the application of positive and virtue psychology to the understanding of psychosocial adaptation to chronic illness and disability. Before we actually move on these topics, let me share my personal stories with you. I believe that this would help you better understand my research area. The next slide is about actually, who I am. I was born in South Korea, and I grew up there until my age at 30 years old. And I was a heavy metal singer actually from 1989 until 1996. Considering I stopped my musician's careers in the beginning of the 1996, I was a heavy metal singer almost for 6 years. In 1996, what happened to me is that actually I had to stop my pursuit to be a better singer in the field of music temporarily for 2.5 years. It was because the military services in Korea, all healthy Korean guys, has to go and serve the Korean Army and Navies and Air Force, whatever. So this is duty, and no one actually can avoid these duties. I was very serious, to be a singer, but obviously this was my duty, so I had to go to serve in the military. 1.5 years after I start my military services, it was a very hot summer in 1997. We had a military operations, it was especially about bomb explosion trainings. And I was not very involved in that trainings because I was already certified in that area as one of the officers in the Korean Army. By the way, I took the RRTC track to be officers because the officers is treated as the federal employee, but the private soldiers are not. So there are great differences in terms of the benefits and the incomes. So I was certified, especially in terms in that bomb explosion areas already. So I wasn't really involved in that training at all. But my private soldiers have to complete all of those training. So I was waiting for my private soldiers. But for some reasons that I can actually tell at this, in this webcast, I got disabilities from that the military operations. First medical diagnosis was really, really severe. Basically, for example, I had to cut off